Hi, and thanks for being a part of this class. When you read a book or an article and you highlight it, you're basically becoming familiar with the material. Even if you reread it a lot of times, you're basically only getting a little bit of fluency on the material. But fluency is not the same thing as mastery. If you are then tested on the material you read and highlighted, you might remember a few things, but you haven't mastered it yet. This happens because you're taking a passive approach instead of an active approach, which is the most effective. Fluency is literally the enemy of learning because it is an illusion. It makes you believe you actually know the material when in reality you're just familiar with it. If you want to learn a new skill or master a keynote presentation, ideally, you want to master these things. If you want to be a fiction writer, you might want to study all the great authors and take a lot of courses on fiction writing. You are basically familiar with fiction writing. But if you don't take the time and energy to practice what you just learned, you will never become a fiction writer. The most effective way I've found to learn any skill or any piece of content is to actively put what you learned into practice. This is called active learning or active retrieving. This means picking the guitar and playing around a few chords that you just learned on the internet, or applying the writing principles in your next blog posts, or creating a logo for your company to put in practice the skills you just learned on YouTube, or putting down the book on leadership and actually applying the information you've learned. It's much easier to find information on the web, watch YouTube videos, or read books than it is to practice. When I wanted to learn more about photography, I became obsessed with watching YouTube videos about the subject and online classes. But I realized I was putting too much emphasis on the cognitive stage of learning. I was not applying the things I was learning. I was just consuming the content, and I basically was becoming familiar with it, but I was not mastering what I was learning. If I wanted to learn photography, I had to pick my camera and actually take a few photos, and that's what I did. I can tell you I learned more in one afternoon with my camera than I did watching dozens of YouTube videos. With this, I'm not saying that learning the basics is not essential, because it is. Otherwise, you won't really know where to start. But this will only give you a certain level of proficiency, that it's not enough to perform any skill or to remember any content. In practical terms, you won't be able to actually show you have a skill if you don't put the time to practice it. If you want to learn chess, it is not enough to learn dozens of moves if you're not actually putting them into the game. So you must play, and you must try to retrieve the movements when you're actually playing, because that's where the skill is. You have to make yourself retrieve what you learned in the cognitive stage of learning and see if you can actually remember those things and apply them into the real world. This is the same thing as doing tests or quizzes before an exam. You effortfully retrieve the information from your brain and test your knowledge to see if you're actually good at what you learned. This is the most effective way to learn anything. To expose yourself to the material or to a skill to see if you actually learned anything. It is the same thing with studying. You should close your notebook and try to retrieve some of the information you read to see if you actually know what you learned. Try to put the material you learned into your own words and say the material out loud. Retrieving this information or saying out loud is not the same thing as rereading the same paragraphs over and over again. Retrieving takes more energy, focus, and effort. But in the end, you will acquire a deeper level of understanding in the shortest amount of time. Also, when you test yourself, you will see exactly which are your weakest points, and then you can work on them. It's really uncomfortable, but science shows it's the most effective way to learn anything. When you test yourself, you have a mechanism that provides you instant feedback. It tells you if you can do it or can't. So now you know exactly to which parts you should dedicate more time to. If you want to start applying this practice, click pause and try to retrieve some of the information I covered on the video. It is an excellent way to test how well you just listened or learned what was being said. And don't forget to actually apply